My wife texted, "I want a divorce. Your mother stresses me out." Then I learned she'd been demanding my family property. Now she's dragging me to court with false abuse charges, and I said, "See you there. I'm 34, and I thought I had a pretty good handle on life when I got married last year." We didn't have decades together, but I honestly believed my wife and I were building something real. I wanted the marriage to be about us, about patience, trust, and learning how to carry each other through stress. Instead, it felt like stress became the foundation of our relationship. From the very beginning, there was tension between my wife and my family. I don't mean the usual awkwardness where two families take time to blend. I mean daily conflict. She'd get upset at the smallest things, how my mom worded something, how my sister asked questions, even how often I visited my parents. I kept thinking it would pass, that maybe it was just adjustment pains. But it didn't pass. It got worse. Then one morning, everything came to a head. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling my phone before heading out to run errands, when her text popped up. It was short, direct, and ice cold. "I want a divorce. Your family stresses me out all the time, especially your mother." I just stared at the words. My wife was in the same house as me, but had chosen to send that message rather than say it out loud. That, somehow, made it sting even more. My first reaction wasn't anger. It was confusion. I couldn't wrap my head around what exactly had pushed her to this point. Sure, there had been tension, but divorce? Out of nowhere. I went to talk to my mother later that day, because I needed clarity. My mom has never been the type to stir drama. She's a quiet, respectful woman who tries to keep peace even when people push her. When I told her about the text, she sighed like she'd been holding something in for too long. And then she told me the truth. According to her, my wife had been giving ultimatums almost since the beginning of our marriage. The demand was always the same. She wanted the family property put into her name. Every time my mom tried to explain that it wasn't possible, my wife would threaten divorce. My mom said she didn't want to burden me with this while I was still adjusting to married life, but it had gotten relentless. I sat there stunned, letting it sink in. I had no idea this was happening behind my back. All those arguments I thought were about little things, tone of voice, boundaries, respect, were apparently just the surface. The real issue was control, and my wife was trying to strong-arm her way into ownership of something that had nothing to do with her. It was like puzzle pieces suddenly clicking into place. The cold stares, the bitterness at family dinners, the random blow-ups, all of it tied back to the same demand. And in that moment, my perspective shifted. I realized I hadn't just been dealing with personality clashes. I had been living inside a negotiation I never agreed to, one where the stakes were my family's entire future. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the last year in my mind, wondering how I had missed it, wondering why she hadn't just been honest with me, and why she felt entitled to something she hadn't earned. I knew then this wasn't just about stress. It was about manipulation, and now I had to decide how to confront it. The day after I found out the truth from my mom, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to hear it straight from the other side. If my wife had been making these demands, I wanted to know whether her mother knew, or if maybe she was encouraging it. So I picked up the phone and called my mother-in-law. I'll be honest, I was hoping for some balance. I wanted her to say, "No, that's not true. My daughter's upset, but we'll work this out. Don't worry, marriages go through hard times." Something reassuring. Something that made me feel like maybe this was just a misunderstanding. But that's not what I got. Instead, her mother spoke with this calm certainty that chilled me. She told me it was completely my responsibility to hand over the property, that it was my duty as a husband to secure her daughter's financial future. I remember her words so clearly. It's her right. If you really love her, you'll make sure everything is in her name. Otherwise, of course, she'll want a divorce. It wasn't even a suggestion, it was an expectation. As if I had no say in the matter at all. That was the moment it hit me like a punch in the chest. This wasn't just my wife pushing these demands. She had her mother backing her every step of the way. The manipulation wasn't isolated. It was coordinated. When I hung up, I felt this strange calm. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was just done. Later that evening, I went to my wife directly. She was sitting at the dining table scrolling through her phone when I walked in. I sat down across from her and said, as evenly as I could, "If this is how you feel, then bring me the divorce papers. I also want a divorce." Her head snapped up, and for a second I could see the shock on her face. She hadn't expected me to call her bluff. Almost instantly, her expression hardened. Her eyes went sharp, and her voice rose. "You don't respect me. You don't respect my family. And now you want a divorce?" she snapped. I didn't match her anger. I didn't raise my voice. I just repeated myself. "Yes, I want a divorce." Her face flushed red. She accused me of betraying her, of siding with my family, of being selfish. Every word was meant to push me into backing down, but I didn't. For the first time in our marriage, I drew a line and refused to move it. And in that moment, something shifted between us. It wasn't just a fight, it was the breaking point. She stood up so fast her chair nearly tipped. She stormed off to the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. I just sat there in the silence, staring at the table. I thought I would feel wrecked, but instead, there was a strange clarity. I finally knew where I stood. The marriage wasn't about love anymore. It was about leverage. Not long after, she packed up her things. I watched her moving around the house with bags in her hands, and it felt like I was watching a stranger. She didn't cry. She didn't hesitate. She just left. I should have felt heartbroken. But honestly, I felt relief. Little did I know, though, that the real storm was just beginning. After she left the house, things went quiet. The silence was heavy, but it wasn't unbearable. It was the kind of silence that comes when constant tension finally lifts. A few hours later, I got a text from her. It was short and clinical. From now on, all communication about the divorce will go through my lawyer. I stared at the message for a moment and then replied with one word: understood. I figured that was it, the beginning of a drawn-out, painful divorce process. Not pleasant, but at least straightforward. But the next day, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, a man in a suit introduced himself as her lawyer. I was expecting a folder of divorce papers, maybe an agreement to look over. Instead, he handed me documents that made my stomach turn. My wife and her mother had filed multiple charges against me: sexual harassment, mental harassment, and domestic abuse. For a few seconds, I just stood there frozen, the words blurring on the page. These weren't small accusations. These were life-altering, reputation-destroying claims, and they were completely false. The lawyer explained that the charges had already been submitted and that I would need to prepare myself for the process ahead. His tone was professional, but I couldn't help but feel like the entire thing had been rehearsed. It hit me in waves. First disbelief, then anger, then this strange steadiness. I realized this wasn't about divorce anymore. This was about intimidation. They weren't just trying to end the marriage. They were trying to crush me, to scare me into handing over what they wanted. I thought back to that phone call with my mother-in-law, her calm insistence that it was my responsibility to give up the property. And now here it was, escalated to the extreme. When the lawyer finished explaining, I looked him in the eye and said calmly, "Okay, I'll see both of them in court." He didn't have much of a response. He just nodded, handed over his card, and left. After he was gone, I sat at the kitchen table with the papers in front of me. My phone buzzed with messages from friends, and I ignored them. I just kept rereading the accusations, trying to wrap my head around how far she was willing to go. It wasn't just betrayal. It was war. Later that night, my mom called to check in. I debated whether to tell her, because I knew it would break her heart, but I couldn't hide something this serious. When I explained, she was quiet for a long time before saying, "They think they can scare you into giving up. Don't let them." Her words gave me a sense of resolve I didn't know I needed. By the time I went to bed, I had already decided I wasn't going to let false accusations define me. I wasn't going to roll over and give them what they wanted. The marriage was already over. I could accept that. But I wasn't going to let lies ruin my life or destroy my family's dignity. The next step wasn't about saving the relationship. It was about standing up for myself. And I was ready for whatever came next. The morning after the lawyer's visit, I woke up with a strange sense of focus. I'd spent the night tossing and turning, replaying every moment of the last year, trying to figure out how love had turned into this battlefield. But when I finally got up, something in me felt steady. Yes, the accusations were devastating. Yes, they could ruin me if taken at face value. But I knew the truth. And I knew the kind of person I had been in that marriage. I wasn't perfect, but I wasn't abusive. I wasn't a monster. That clarity gave me strength. I met with my own attorney the next day. We went over everything in detail: the text messages, the sudden demands, the property issue, the conversation with her mother. My lawyer listened carefully, then leaned back in his chair and said, "They're trying to build leverage. We'll dismantle it piece by piece." Hearing that felt like someone had finally opened a window in a suffocating room. Meanwhile, my wife's family didn't slow down. They spread rumors. They painted me as controlling, cold, even dangerous. Some of my own acquaintances looked at me differently, and that hurt more than I'd like to admit. But the people who knew me best, my mom, my close friends, never wavered. They saw through it. Weeks passed, and the tension built as we prepared for court. Every time I thought about it, part of me still couldn't believe this was the same woman I had once stood at the altar with, promising to love and protect. How had we gone from vows to fabricated charges? But then I reminded myself of what my mom had said. They think they can scare you into giving up. And once I understood that, their power over me started to shrink. When the day finally came to face them, I walked into that courthouse calm. Not angry, not broken, calm. My wife and her mother were already there, whispering with their lawyer, shooting me quick, sharp glances as I sat down. There was a part of me that almost pitied her. Almost. Because in her eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen before, regret. Not about the lies, but about the fact that I hadn't folded the way she expected. She looked nervous, restless, as if she'd realized too late that the game she was playing was bigger than she could handle. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it simple. I explained the truth. I presented evidence of her messages, the timeline of events, the sudden escalation after I refused to sign over property. I didn't embellish. I didn't rant. I just told the story exactly as it happened. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I was taking my life back. The case is still ongoing, but I've made peace with whatever comes. I know I'll walk out of this with my integrity intact, even if it takes time to clear my name officially. Because lies can only stretch so far before they snap back. The marriage had lasted only a year, but it taught me a lifetime's worth of lessons. About trust, about boundaries, about what happens when love is mixed with entitlement and manipulation. I'm not bitter. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just determined to make sure the truth comes out, no matter how long it takes. And as for her, she walked out thinking she'd destroy me, but all she managed to do was destroy any chance of respect or reconciliation. Sometimes standing your ground isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's just saying no and refusing to move. That's where I am now. I appreciate you watching till the end. Hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more content.